sun's come out on this blustery day. But now there's some gorgeous lights hitting things, and I just love painting small details. You don't have to do the wide view all the time. Homing in on something simple and small makes a fantastic watercolour, and these deck chairs have really touched my eye with the light that's striking them. I love the shape of the light seat against the darker background. That's what interests me. I'm going to sketch that shape and take a couple of photographs. I've printed out a couple of versions of these deck chairs to remind myself that the tone is not specific, it is relative. So one is slightly darker than the other. And because they're quite complex shapes, the actual framework of the deck chair, I'm going to just lightly paint in the dark, unlit sides of that framework with my aureolin and Prussian blue, so that when I come to do my background wash, I make sure I leave the lights out of the wash. So I'm coming down the framework with this light wash. It doesn't have to paint this exact shape. What it's doing is effectively reminding me that the lit sides of these deck chair frames are not going to be touched by my first wash of green for the grass in the background. And because it's a nice light wash, it will disappear under the darker colour, but just tint it and give it a nice bit of warmth. So here is quite complicated. You see, this is why I really needed this, because look at this area under here, and I want the background wash to go over everywhere that isn't lit, more or less, so that it binds the composition together. It's a simple subject, but not necessarily a simple composition, in the sense that the deck chairs require drawing to get their shapes right, and their shapes are the very thing that is exciting about them. I put the pigeons in because in a couple of photographs I took, I thought, yeah, there's pigeons, and pigeons are so London and so park, and I quite like the position of these two in the darker photograph, so I've actually put them in exactly in the same position as the photograph shows them. But obviously you're not obliged to do that. You can move them around, move your pigeons wherever you want. But in this instance, I really like where they've actually positioned themselves. And so I put them one here, one there. I often think it's easier if a photograph does work out compositionally to be more or less followed, because it requires such a lot of concentration just painting. If you haven't actually got to have to rethink the composition too much and work from too much reference, it can make it easier. But then you mustn't fall into this slave copying mode either. So in a way, both things are good. I also find when you're drawing it out, you start to see exactly why you fell in love with it as a composition. These wonderful geometric shapes, one against the other, and it's the actual space between the shapes that is the fascination. It's these triangles of background that are what fascinates me. And the more distant deck chair, the framework is cooler than the one closer to me. So I'm actually doing my underlying wash in Prussian blue as opposed to the aureolin. But remember, this is only an indicator for me so that I know where not to let my background wash go and where to retain these highlights, because there's lots of little lights on top of this framework that are truly yummy, and I'd be very sad to cover them up. I always keep in my paint box some titanium white or some Chinese white, so that if I do lose small lights, I can retrieve them with opaque paint. So I don't fret about it. If I lose them, I will retrieve them if they're needed. Right, that is the structure. There's not a light there anyway. Top of the head also of the pigeon. I think I want to remember to leave that out. And the light on there. And I think that is it for the light area. So now we can go in with a much larger brush. Nice size, 14, round sable, holds lots of water, holds lots of pigment, and it's got to be aureolin, hasn't it? The colour of foliage hit by the sun. Not too dense a colour, but just nice. And I'm going to use this to shape the lights against the darks. So it's going to come round, down, over everything that isn't lit by the sun. All this side here, no light on the chair that side. Obviously the shape of the deck chair canvas itself must be left out. Now this little pigeon here, he's dark. He's actually quite a dark pigeon. He's dark against the background. His beak's light, but his beak can stay as aureolin, so he can actually be painted all over with aureolin. When you're looking for subjects for painting, what you always want to find for a watercolour is contrast of light and dark. So not shut your eyes, sorry, half close your eyes. And you will see if a pattern emerges. One of the nice things about digital cameras is that the small frame that you look into, the small viewfinder, gives you very easily a chance to see whether a painting works or not. So they are a very useful aid. Because they're so small, you can see quite quickly whether it's got a nice dark or light pattern. Right, so what have we got here? We have everything painted bar the highlights. I think maybe that's a little bit of a fat highlight. Yep. Okay, we can go in with some colour now. That really is a wash of sunlight. Right, I'm making my green out of Prussian blue and burnt umber. Prussian blue and aureolin makes a very bright green, and I think it would just be too bright. So once again, we are bringing it up. Oh good, it's nice and damp still. That's what I wanted. And this is going to be as dark as it gets, so I've got to decide now on the density of this darkness. It doesn't have to be as dark as the photograph. Remember, photograph is a photograph. This is a painting. Tone is relative. As long as it's darker than the light, it's dark. And actually, this lovely dark background is darker than even the darkness of the deck chair. Right, I'm going to bring some light into the trees. And this is, remember, this is a detail, but doesn't mean that it's any less of a watercolour. So the background is simple. Its purpose is to bring out the lights. I want to keep this all nice and soft. I want to keep it running together and not feel edgy, or I just want it to be soft. So we just plunge some nice dark colour into the corners, dark up against here. We've got trees here, so we can make this lighter here. Up against this side here, so we've got to go slowly here to get this absolutely light against dark. Lovely excuse for using every part of a brush as well. The colour getting a bit dry, add a little bit in. The thing is with watercolour, I think, is to know when you can go quickly and when you can go slowly, so that you get that rush of the brush, but also that you get clarity and form where you need it.